Hey, everybody, it's Anthony Brogdon. I'm coming at you strongly, strongest, stronger, stronger, all them strongs that you can think of. That's how I come at you because I like that word. You'll hear me say something about it a little bit later. But I am super excited about today's show. I got a gentleman on the show today. I met him in Atlanta. Let me tell you how smooth this guy is, right? I was speaking at the National Association of Black School Educators, and people like what I talk about, right? So they invited me to come down and speak, and I tell you that because if you need a speaker to tell you about some good Black history, I can be your guy. So I'm at the conference, and I'm sitting at a table with some distinguished gentlemen, including this guy. So we sitting there, and we all get a little something to eat. This guy picks up the tab, everybody. Oh my God, he got to be rich. He picked up the tab, and I was thrilled because he didn't even know me. That's the kind of character he is. You're going to love what he got to say today on the show, Strong Inspirations. And if I didn't say it, my name is Anthony Brogdon because I'm excited to be with this gentleman who picked up the tab. So then I looked for him and we ran each other. I said, man, let me tell you something. I got a gift for you. And I gave him a book. And I'm excited because then, let me tell you more. My man sent me a message, said, I like the book, and told some other people. I'm not playing with y'all, my friends. Hit the subscribe button on Strong Inspirations. Hit the like button on this video. You're going to like it. You're going to feel the warmth of this gentleman. Hit the notifications bell so you get a ding, a shock, smoke signal, something to let you know there is new content on Strong Inspirations. And then, my friends, tell somebody. Do not keep it to yourself. Let other people know about this free Black history. Free Black history. Let others know. You can come here and you can watch these shows because this is my contribution to civilization from around the world. Did you see the one I did with the guy who tried to spy on a KKK rally and got caught? He got beat minutes from his life. And you say, well, dang, if that happened, and you interviewed him, so he survived. Did you see the one I did where the KKK surrounded the party that he was DJing? This is in Birmingham. This guy was the voice of the civil rights in Birmingham in his heyday. And the KKK surrounded the club he was DJing, and the white folks said, you ain't messing with this guy. Watch that video. Or the one that the guy was at the tree with the rope around his neck and was about to be lynched. And God stepped in and one of the guys under the rope let him go. I got that guy. I mean, I give it to you through the guests that come on here straight, no chaser, to intoxicate your mind, to make you stagger. And this gentleman right here, you're going to stagger from listening to what he got to say. So do those, my friends. Little housekeeping tips. Y'all might know I'm a filmmaker. I did this documentary called Business in the Black, The Rise of Black Business in America. It's streaming on Amazon. I wrote a book on it called Black Business Book. Over 200 amazing facts. The first Black business owners in America are cited in this book. I did a children's book, 30 Rich Black People. You let your kids read it with them. You ain't gonna know all this. You and your kids will learn something. Get you a copy of that. I got 2 calendars, but I give you Black History 365. One is titled "Do Your Best, Be Your Best." It's quotes by famous African Americans, and the other is that same old term I like using. They did it. 12 rich Black people who lived in the 1800s. Now, you hear me use this term strong a lot. Strong is my favorite word. I wish my middle name was Strong. And in my world, strong stands for strength, tenacity, resilience, and a sense of oneness, nobility, and grace. And that is my introduction to the strong brother on the channel today. Come on, man. Tell us your name. Let's get it on.
Good day, depending on where you are and what time you hear this. My name is Gary Torrence, and I did meet Mr. Brogdon in at NAPSE, which I've been going to for quite a while, the National Association of Black School Educators. Our discussion, if I recall, our discussion had to do with education and also the state of Black people,
Right.
and as well as some historical notes that there were four of us who passed around information that some of the rest of us didn't know,
That's right.
which made it extremely informative.
Yeah.
So the best thing I can say is I can start out by talking about, first of all, I've been very, very fortunate in my lifetime. I had great parents, even though they were divorced when I was 4, but they were the best parents they could have been to myself and my 3 sisters.
Okay, let me
Uh,
stop you there. I mean, no disrespect, but I want to get into that. And I'm gonna start with this question. Where were you born and raised?
I was born and raised in St. Louis, Missouri, and all my schooling, except for my graduate work, I did complete in St. Louis. I went to Ashland Elementary for first 2 grades, Waring Elementary up until the 7th grade. And I did go to a junior high for a small amount of time in Overland, Missouri, but moved back and went to Sumner High School, which is the oldest Black high school west of the Mississippi.
Okay.
And I graduated college from Washington University, and then I received a graduate degree from Chicago State here in Chicago, where I live now.
Okay, let's stay on that. Did you grow up in a black neighborhood? Kind of middle class? What was that dynamic, if I may ask?
I grew up in a mixed neighborhood, which was very unusual because St. Louis I considered to be in the South. And it was a place called Town, which was really basically an experiment. It was mixed income. It was mixed so far as race goes. But I have to say that it was a great place to grow up.
Okay,
It really was.
okay.
We one of the things I always think about, there were some of the football cardinals who lived in the neighborhood, and we used to play basketball with them in the summertime
Oh, really?
during the off season. Yes,
Okay,
guy by the name of Bob Reynolds, I think MacArthur Lane, who was a fullback um, for the Cardinals at that time, he would come over. So these guys were not, we didn't look at them the same way that people look at athletes,
okay. Let me
and
ask you
and they were
this.
very humble too.
Yeah, with that said, you grew up like that. Where was the ghetto? How close were you to the ghetto? How close were you to the wealthier or white people and or black people?
The ghetto, I have to really think about that. Nobody's ever asked me that question. The ghetto was probably at that time considered to be on the north side of St. Louis. It was also considered to be where a theater called the Fox Theater was not far from us. A place called Blue Mire could have been considered to be the ghetto. Uh, Pruitt-Igoe, which is where the Spinks brothers grew up, and I had relatives down there. That would, at that time, at that point in time, would have considered to be the ghetto. But unfortunately, the state of the housing situation and the conditions are not the same, were not the same then as they are now.
Yeah, yeah, sure.
Things seems to be a lot worse
Yeah.
in what we consider to be the ghetto.
Let me ask
Uh,
you, where did the white people live?
there were white people who lived in Laclede Town.
Yeah, but in
Um,
the richer white people.
the
Yeah.
richer white people lived at that time probably on the north side, and they lived in what we call the county. We didn't use the word suburb, but pretty much now it's used the word suburb. So in the surrounding suburbs, um, that's where I would say the richer white people live. Now there were rich white people that lived in the city, and right off of a place called Kings Highway and Linwood. and they lived in these huge houses that you could not see from the street.
Okay.
So I didn't know anybody that lived in those places, but
Yeah,
we just
yeah.
knew that people lived there were rich.
Let's go back a little bit. How did your family get to St. Louis? And the first part of that question is, where's the enslavement at? Do you know that?
Oh,
Where's the
absolutely,
even the
absolutely,
further southern connection? And then how
abs
did they get to St. Louis?
absolutely. Okay, so on my mother's side of the family, my 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 mother moved to St. Louis as a teenager. She was 14. Her mother was born in Arkansas. Excuse me, in Louisiana, and they then moved to Arkansas. But let me back up a little bit. So my great great grandfather, who was enslaved, was a carpenter in Louisiana, St. Landry's Parish. He then, in 1865, when enslavement was over, at least chattel slavery was over, he left Louisiana and ended up in Liberty, Texas. And him and my great great grandmother had 11 children. And one of those was my great grandmother, who I definitely remember, and very distinct memories of her. So my mother was then born in Marion, Arkansas, and she was there until she was 9. Then she went to Texas to be raised, and for that part of her life, she was raised by my great grandmother's sister. And then by this time, my grandmother had moved to St. Louis, and my grandmother had my mother come up with her at the age of 14.
Let me ask you this. Do you know of any trauma in the family having to leave in the middle of the night? Because it's funny, I've asked that question to somebody, and somebody said, man, you got me to thinking. There is such a story. Is there
There's
such a story like that, maybe?
there's stories on actually on both sides of my family. So let me go to my father's side.
Wow.
My father was actually born, he was the youngest of 9 children. He was born in Louisiana, and his 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 father's brother was sharecropping for a white man, and the white man didn't want to pay him. They got into an argument, and the white man hit my would have been my uncle. I never met him.
Right.
Hit my uncle, and my grandfather intervened and severely injured this person, and they left. So my grandfather went home that day and told the family, "Look, we got to go. So you all go on ahead, and then I will follow." And I think it was about 2 to 3 weeks because he walked from Louisiana over to Canton, Mississippi. And my father was a baby, so he was being carried by my grandmother in her arms. So that's one story. The other story, which I like to tell, is my great great grandfather, who left Louisiana after enslavement, was a carpenter, and he was offered land, and I guess would be the equivalency of a job at that time. And this, as the story has been very consistent in my family, he was walking, and the enslaver asked him to stay, and he told the enslaver to go to hell. And he walked off and ended up in Liberty, Texas, where they actually started a church, where he actually started a church, even though he wasn't a minister. But the church is still in Liberty, Texas.
Oh man. A lot of times the older people don't like telling some of the stories in the family. They're like they might not want to tell that my man beat the white guy. Was that the case in your family, or kind of how did you hear it, the story?
I was a very inquisitive child, and I found as I got older and I became more interested in my history, I found different ways to ask questions. And that particular story was not one that seemed to be hidden, but it certainly wasn't one that was told when I was young. So I was probably in my early 20s when I first heard about that story. But it wasn't like anybody was trying to hide it. But there are
Okay.
other stories
Yeah.
that I had to pull out of people.
Yeah.
because some of them I think were embarrassing. I think people tried to forget. You know, many of our people have been traumatized during that time period. So it's difficult for many of them to, or it was difficult for many of them to come out and tell those kind of stories. And I think the other thing too is because the world changed, and this is just my opinion, a lot of our people did not want to instill hate in Black children and in Black people. And they also didn't want them to go out and get hurt in case,
They
they,
had this hate. They
yeah,
had
they
a
had
system.
this hate in them.
Okay.
And I'm not
Okay.
saying it's right or wrong what they
Right.
did.
Right.
It's
Right.
just my opinion on one of the things that was done.
When you alluded to this though, and we're gonna stay on this just a tad. Embarrassment. What would be embarrassing? The way they had to bow down to white people, or their reaction to what white people did? Because when you heard the story of what happened to him and the reaction that he had, that that gave you a sense. This is a question. A sense of pride, saying that was his reaction. He didn't just take that.
Oh
Or would
yeah,
you have been mad at him for doing that? You know what I mean? I don't know.
no, it was a sense of pride for me for him. I wish I could have met him. For him standing up for himself and standing up for his family, like I think anybody
Yes.
would have, any person would have done. Embarrassment in that my father did talk about how when he would be walking down the sidewalk in Mississippi and a white person, no matter what age, would come down the same sidewalk, then he'd have to step off the sidewalk.
I got you.
Um, these were one-on-one conversations, so I don't
Yes.
think that he was necessarily embarrassed to the degree. But and when I said embarrassment, there were things that we were involved in that we probably regret. I mean, I have relatives who ran moonshine. Some of them learn how to become mechanics uh, because they were running moonshine in the backwoods. That's not something that I think that they were necessarily proud of. So, and then because of the institution of enslavement, there were activities that we were involved in that were not good even within our own families. And those types of things are very, very difficult to talk about. And I have sat down with relatives and talked about some of the things that we went through in my family and people experience that in some cases it took me years to get the full story. And in some cases, I didn't get the full story until
Okay.
after certain people had died.
Oh, yeah. I get kind of understand that. But hearing these stories, what do you get out of them, though? I mean, I guess that's well. Why did you ask? What did that do for you?
I was curious because I wanted to know about my history. I and I think at some point in life, it kind of helped me to maybe understand a little bit about me as well, because my feeling is that I inherit certain things from both mother and father. They inherited certain things from their parents and so on and so on and so forth.
I got you.
And I wanted to know, I, the biggest thing is I wanted to know the truth.
I got you.
And one of the things that was very eye-opening to me is that my great great grandfather was a carpenter. My great great grandmother was a homemaker, even though she was not real dark, but she was fairly dark and she taught herself how to read. So there are several things I think that are very prideful. And the fact that on both sides of my family, people stood up for
I
their
got you.
rights. They didn't just run and hide. They didn't just, and I think they did things smartly and intelligently, but they didn't just simply just sacrifice their dignity.
Yes, I got you. Well, one of the things that happens is when we hear these stories, did you wonder how your family made you want to go to school?
I'm sorry, could you repeat
Did
that?
you ever wonder how your family made you want to go to school? How your family kind of broke through whatever cycle there was? to want to be successful in life? Can, did somebody, was it your great great grandfather that said, okay, this is going to be our plight in my family? Do you know who might have triggered that?
Well, this is the story that I was told. I don't remember this, but my mother said that we were out shopping somewhere and I saw a black man with a suit on and a briefcase, and I looked at him and said, "Mom, I want to be like that."
There you go.
Um, my mother did not push us to go to college. My mother pushed us to be good people.
Yeah, okay.
And my mother would, her position was, if you want to go to college, then I will do everything to help you go to college.
Okay.
But I want you to be a good person, a responsible person, and to take care of yourself.
Okay.
So even though I was my mother's only son, I was in no way, form, or fashion spoiled. I had to do everything everybody else did.
Okay.
So my mother was extremely supportive of, in fact, all four of us, well, three of us did go to college. My oldest sister, she's retired now, but she worked right out of high school all the way up until she retired.
Okay.
So we were all responsible. We were all what I consider to be good citizens.
I got you.
Uh,
I got you.
so that was now my father was the worker. My father owned the lawn care business and he
Oh,
worked
okay.
as a laborer. So if you wanted money, you had to go to work in the summertime. He didn't just give you any money.
I
Now, my
got you.
father also, I had other siblings, not from my mother.
Right.
We all know each other. So if any of us wanted, uh, like I said, if any of us wanted money, we had to go to work.
Yeah, I got you.
So my physical work ethic, I got from my father. My father was not an academically educated man. He went to the fourth grade.
Hmm.
But in my opinion, he was just as intelligent as anybody who went to college.
I love it. I'm gonna piggyback on this, and this is gonna kind of lead into some of the stories. Let's say St. Louis was once known as a sundown town. Had you heard that?
I don't remember hearing that, but there were certain parts of St. Louis that were known when I was growing up as sundown areas. One of the places was called Dago Hill, which was the south side of St. Louis. And that was a place where I would hear often that blacks just didn't go, and
Okay.
especially you didn't go there after dark. There were certain counties where if you drove through, one's not too far from Ferguson. People are probably familiar with Ferguson because of Michael Brown. Um, if you drove through this county, which was right would border St. Louis, if you were black, 9 times out of 10 you were gonna get stopped.
Oh, really? This might be, and I keep it real on this. Had you ever been called a nigger?
Not by a white person.
Oh, okay. So
No,
that's different then. Yeah.
no. I mean,
Yeah.
most people I know, most of my friends have, but not to my face. Now,
Oh,
I
really?
will I will say that there was one time I was working a summer job out of college, and there was a guy who did not know that I was sitting at the table, and he made the comment, and he cut that word nigga short because he kind of glanced over at me and NIG. But no, I've never been called a nigga by a white person, and I
Yeah.
don't like being called a nigga by a black person.
Yeah. Yeah.
Never
I
have.
love
I don't like that word.
it. Growing up as you did, and having maybe a few privileges, wait, what did you feel different than those who did not? Let me give you an example. I remember my dad, we kind of middle class family, let's say. There was some black people who kind of hated on us. Did you ever feel that from black people? Because
I,
y'all didn't live in the hood? Could you code switch when you went in the hood? Or was you follow what I'm asking you?
I understand what you're saying. I can't say that. Where I lived in the Cleve town, it was people paid according to their income. So we had some people who were not well off. To give you an example, there was a young man. um, what grade? I can't think of. I think he first came into school in the third grade, and he wore the exact same shirt to school every day. It was a white shirt, and I think there were two pairs of pants. And I remember one time he came to school and roaches actually crawled out of his shoe. And of course, students ridiculed him. So, but at the same time, in that same neighborhood, we had students who were medical students at St. Louis University, which was right down the street.
Oh, I like that.
So it was people of varied income. Laclede Town, which you can Google it if you get a chance.
Yeah.
Laclede Town was a definite experiment.
Okay.
And so there were people from various backgrounds, but I can't say that I sense anybody hating me. Now, my grandmother, who lived in a place called Car Square Village, which was not far from Pruitt-Igoe, when I would go visit my grandmother, I would get into altercations with some of the kids. It was an all-black neighborhood. It would probably be considered as the hood, and
Yeah.
it could have been jealousy. I don't. I've never
Yeah.
thought about it in those terms, but it could have been.
Yeah. When we talked, as we were sitting at the table, and you maybe know what these are, you shared some stories, some history stories, some things that you know, and that was one of the things that we were going to talk about tonight. Do you remember what they were, or what? Or I guess my question is, what angle what do you want to say to us now of some history that you know, you research, whatever, whatever.
I guess I'd really have to think about and be triggered by exactly what we were talking about. Well, one of the things that I would like us to know is the truth as best we can get it about our history, because the things that I've said about my family are not unique. Other families experienced and have these types of stories, which are the same and probably, even more fabulous, I think, than some of the things that I talked about. I, I really need to know,
Yeah, I don't remember what.
what particular subjects we were talking about. Now,
Right, right.
we might have talked about my time living in Africa.
Yeah, there you
Uh,
go. There you go.
I taught school in Malawi, Africa for 2 years. I was a math instructor at the engineering branch of the university.
Let me stop
So
you there. Let me stop you. How did you get that? How did that happen for you? For those who might want to say, I want to go to Africa and maybe do something like that. How did that happen?
okay, so let me give you so here's some history. When I was in college, I was an electrical engineering undergraduate student. There were two other students in my class who were both from Malawi, and we ended up studying together. The only thing I knew about Africa at that point in my life was the Tarzan movies I'd seen.
Mm-hmm.
And first of all, I was fascinated by how smart these guys were, by the information they'd already known, and how worldly they were. Because I didn't really know anything about England or France or Africa, most of all. So they started telling me these things, and I became fascinated. And I said, okay, I'm gonna come as soon when I go to work and I make some money. I'm gonna come to Malawi to see if you're telling me the truth about how what Africa's like. And in 1989, I took my first vacation after I graduated from undergrad, and I went to Malawi and stayed almost 3 weeks. And there are numerous stories I could tell from that trip and other trips. And from that trip, I ended up going to. I've visited 22 countries. I worked in Kenya for a summer, and I worked in Malawi for 2 years. So on my
I've never heard of that country.
Yeah, Malawi's in Southeast Africa. It's actually surrounded by Zimbabwe, Zambia, and Mozambique. It's square miles, it's about the size of Pennsylvania. And right now, Malawi has about 20 million people. When I was living there, it was about 11 million people. So to further uh, to continue in answering your question, how I
Right.
ended up there. So I believe it was my third trip. I got my graduate degree, and I had a conversation with the vice principal. at the university level in many other countries, the principal and vice principal are like the president and vice president. And I had done a lot of traveling, and this was at the end of 1998. And I just sat down and had a conversation with him and said, I'd love to come over here and teach. But for me, I knew teaching would be more like me learning, even though I would be teaching. And at the time, he said, well, we can't afford that because Malawi is not considered to be a wealthy country. It's considered to be one of the poorest in the world. So about 6 months later, he sent me an email and asked me if I was interested. And I told him, yes, I'm interested. And I quit my job and, you know, came to an agreement with the University of Malawi, and I was off. And like I said, I taught there for 2 years.
What was did you kiss the ground the first time you went? I've heard of that. I've never been to Africa. That
No,
I mean, I hear people
no,
tell that
no,
story.
no,
What have you?
no. For me, the highlight of my trips to Africa have been the people. I mean, it's great to be on the ground. For people who that's what they want to do. No, I've never kissed the ground.
Yeah.
My whole objective and what excited me was meeting people, was sitting down talking with people, was getting to know people, was learning what Africa was really like. Because the information that we get in most cases, I would say, is skewed and it's not accurate. And the only way you can really know what's going on in any part of the world is that you, in some way, form, or fashion, need to be on the ground.
Is there any? I'm sure there's a few of them. The one ha moments that you had when you got there.
Aha
Yeah,
moments when I
haha.
went.
Like it was skewed this way, but it ain't like that when you get here.
Well, actually, my first trip was an aha moment because I didn't even know that Africa had schools, universities, that people were driving. Not that it's a big deal to me, but new
Right.
cars and the streets were clean. I mean, it was altogether different than what I had been exposed to, which was very little, like I said, other than Tarzan movies. And as a result of that, so let me go back a little bit. My great great grandmother always talked about how she was, and I never met her, but these are very consistent stories, how she was 100% African. And her mother uh, either came off the enslavement ship or was born right after that.
What was that country like? What is it? You told me about the landmass, but it's got a beautiful downtown. What's the major city? Those
The
kind of things.
the major
Mountains, ocean, lakes. Is it home
there
to
there are
river?
mountains. In fact, Malawi is actually known for Lake Malawi, which there's a fish that everybody eats, which is very good, called chambo. And um, they don't, because it's consumed so heavily, they don't have enough to really export. But the major city is Lilongwe. That's the commercial center. The political center is a city called Blantyre, and they're both, from the U.S. standards, they're both very, very small. The mountain is very pretty. The mountainous area is very beautiful. I've spent a fair amount of time in my trips there, going out into the mountainous areas, talking with people in villages, and learning about, for example, the road to freedom.
Because they were colonized by who?
They were colonized by the British. So Malawi used to be called Nyasa land, which was um, part of, I think it was Nyasa land and Rhodesia. Rhodesia used to be Zimbabwe. I mean, yeah, Zimbabwe was Rhodesia.
Right.
So the Dutch, who came from the Netherlands area, they had a stronghold on that area. But then the British came in, and the British ended up actually fully colonizing Malawi. But they gained their independence in 1963. I believe that's the right year.
Okay. Did you see white people in the country?
There were a few. There were some.
But they wasn't running it like you do in some other countries where it's a minority white people, but they run all of the big businesses and all that. Was that the case there?
They were, yeah, there were some running some. The major business owners or the people who control the commerce at that time were Indians from India. And there's a large Indian population uh, still, to my understanding, today in Malawi.
Uh, how did they accept you coming from America to teach and whatnot?
It was great. It was great. I can say that I learned more from the students that I taught, from the people who befriended me. There's a family that adopted me. In fact, one of my adopted brothers, we just talked last week. I felt as though I was treated as well as a person could be treated who was not born and raised and did not actually speak the language in that area. I never felt that there was animosity. Um, and if there was, it was from people that I didn't get to know. But I never felt uncomfortable. I always felt welcomed. In fact, if anybody was the arrogant one, it was me.
Did did uh did they have all the modern conveniences at the university that you knew of when you went to college? Uh, were their textbooks on par? Were their
No,
teaching techniques on
no.
par? That kind of thing.
Well, the teaching techniques were a lot more rigorous, but so far as having resources, materials, so I was teaching courses like calculus, statistics, differential equations. Most of the students did not have calculators. And if they did, they were very rudimentary type calculators.
Okay.
There was no bookstore to go to well, there was a bookstore, but there was no, students in calculus did not have calculus books that everybody had the same books. They had to scrounge for the books, for whatever books they could find. And a lot of the students went by my notes. For example, in the lecture hall where I taught my first calculus series courses, the blackboards were cracked. Sometimes we had to scrounge between us professors to get chalk. So
Hmm.
the no, the resources were not there,
Okay.
but the intellect, the rigor, the desire to learn, unquestionably.
Okay. You said you've been to 22 countries. Did you go from? And I know I'm gonna say you're gonna say yes, but when you was in Malawi, you went to other countries from there. I suspect, right?
Well, I visited when I was in Malawi. I did go to South Africa. I went to Swaziland. I went to Lesotho. I went to Mozambique. Actually, I ended up going to Angola, to the Democratic Republic of Congo. But these various trips were trips that were taken before and after I was actually living in Malawi. So
Right. Okay.
all of my travel was not actually centered around me actually living in Malawi.
When you went, did you what place do you like the best?
I knew you were going to ask me that question.
Yeah.
That's a very difficult question to answer because everywhere I went, with the exception of a few countries, I met people who, we kept in contact, and they were just great people. Again, my focus, my what I really enjoyed was the time I spent with people. And just to give you a quick example, when we were in Zimbabwe, we met the governor at that time of the Central Province, and we were at a restaurant, and it was a Benihana type setup. And so there were, I think, 7 people sitting at the table. And so we all got into a conversation, and he asked us, he said, "Well, have you been to the Great Zimbabwe?" And I said, "No, we're not going to have time to get there." So the Great Zimbabwe is a historical place because Zimbabwe means that made of stone. And it's one of the oldest cities. I mean, you could almost compare it to the pyramids. And this is one of the things that the governor said. He says, how are you going to come to Zimbabwe and not go to the Great Zimbabwe? It's like going to Egypt and not going to see the pyramids.
I got you.
Well, we didn't know who he was. So he said, I tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you my driver, and I'm going to have him, and he'll take you to the Great Zimbabwe and any place else you want to go. So my first thought was, who is this guy? I don't know who
Right,
this
right,
guy
right,
is.
right.
But I befriended a guy who worked in the hotel. And in fact, he took us to his village and so on and so forth. So I went to him and I said, who is this guy? And said he's going to give us his driver because we're not just going to get in anybody's car. He
Yes,
said, do you know who that is? He said that guy sits right next to, at the time, Mugabe was the president of Zimbabwe.
I've heard
That
that name.
he sits on his right. That's his right hand man, and he's the governor of the biggest province, which is almost like a state to us. Was like a state, and if he says he's going to give you his driver, and he did, and the gentleman, his name was Alfred, picked us up at about I think we left about 5 o'clock the next morning. He took us to the Great Zimbabwe and to several other places. This is the type of reception that I've received. Now, it's probably the only high-level person that, well, actually did meet, well, that was here in the States. I did meet the president of Malawi, who unfortunately is now deceased. But that's the type of reception that I received.
Is that because the Africans respect us, and or they want us to know their country, to understand the difference between what we've heard and what's reality, and hopefully that might invite tourism? Or is there just a innate kinship between them and us?
I
Because
think
how does someone offer so much, you know what I mean, just to some stranger?
well, that's a very good question. And I wish more people would ask that type of question, but it's a question I think cannot be really pigeonholed and answered because everybody's different.
Yeah,
And I don't want to put one group of people, I don't want to categorize them in a specific way. What I can say is that I think that part of the reception that I received also had to do with my introduction of me and the way that I attempted to relate to people, the way I talk to people, some of my inquisitiveness. I don't think that you can say Africans, just like can you
yeah,
say
yeah, yeah, yeah.
black people in
Okay.
the
Yeah,
United States,
yeah, right, right, right.
and I've heard opposite stories. I've heard people tell all kinds of horror stories about their interactions when they went to Africa. I have not experienced that.
Yeah, I got you. Do you speak another language?
I mean, I can speak bits and pieces of, the greetings and
Okay,
where's the house and that type of thing, but not fluently, no.
but in the country, what is it? How you pronounce it again?
Malawi,
Malawi. Is English the native language, or is it some other
it's
language?
not the native language. The native
Not
language
native.
is Chichewa, but because they were Malawi was colonized by the British, the national language
Yes,
that
yes,
everybody speaks just about is English.
yeah. Is it a long flight? How do you get
Yes,
there to fly?
yes, yes. Um, the the flight is anywhere between probably 16 and 20 hours.
Okay, so you
Because
go from where to where to get there? How
you
does it
can go
normally work?
you can go, for example, you can go through Europe, or you can go from New York directly to South Africa, and then from South Africa you would take a flight to Malawi.
Oh,
When I
okay.
went the first time, I actually I went through England,
Yeah, that
and I,
that
I
helped
had
break it up some, I'm sure. Yeah.
yeah, I don't mind the long flights, but it's
Oh,
not for everybody. A lot of people
yeah.
don't like the long flights. And I had a 4 hour, no, I had a 7 hour layover on my on my first trip to Africa, to Malawi.
As we almost come to a close, I went to Europe. Like I said, I have not been to Africa. I went to Europe one time, and I had this dream that I had not been, fulfilled all I wanted out of life, and so on and so forth. And I woke up in the middle of the night, and I looked out the window, and I said, "I'm in London, England, and I can see the Big Ben clock or downtown or whatever." And to myself, I said, if I have not fulfilled anything, I'm in London. This is huge for a kid, myself. Was there a moment like that where you closed your eyes and said, dang, look at where I'm at? Coming
I
from
think
St. Louis, coming from humble beginnings, so on and so forth, to say, dang, because there are other people who have not done that, who didn't take that chance.
I think that probably with the exception of maybe the last 3 or 4 trips, every time I've gone to the continent, I've said, I'm in another part of the world. I, I'm, you know, I think I've always said that to a degree. I think is that the question
Yeah,
that
yeah,
you're
yeah, yeah,
asking
yeah,
me?
yeah, yeah, yeah. And maybe close your eyes and thought to the gods, look at what you helped me do.
Well, I have to go back to my parents. I have to go back to people who were mentors when I was growing up, because all of these people have helped to shape me. And my mother was the type of person who didn't do anything to demotivate or discourage. Because I remember on
Okay.
my first trip to Africa, she was not happy about me going. And she never said it to me, but she said it to my sister. But when I came
She
back,
was not happy
and
because she was afraid for you.
she was afraid. Yeah, she was fearful, which it
Yeah,
makes sense.
yeah,
But when
yeah.
I came back and I showed all the slides, because I took slides, she she said she wanted to go. But unfortunately, she got ill not too long after that, and she passed away. But there's one quick story I want to share
Yeah.
with you if I
Sure,
can.
sure, please.
I have taken a couple groups to Africa, and in preparation for one group I was going to take to Namibia, I met with a young gentleman who had a travel agency, and we were mapping out the trip and where we're going to go, what we're going to do. And we sat down for lunch, and he looked at me, and well, we were in conversation. He said, I want to ask you a question. It's something here that we don't understand. We don't understand how Black people can call each other nigger. So at that time, I was trying to justify it, even though I'm not one who
All right.
uses
I
that
got
word
you.
against people and don't like people using it at
Yes.
me.
Yes, sure.
And I said to him, well, it's kind of a term of endearment. It's something that Black people do amongst themselves.
Sure.
And I said, do you understand? And he looked at me with utter confusion, and he said, no, I don't. So then he asked me, he said, do you know what the word Kafir means? Kafir is the equivalency of nigger that the mainly the Afrikaners, the white people in South Africa, use in referring to Black people. And I was familiar with the word, and I said yes. And he said, I've heard that word spoken twice in my life. And one of the times is sitting at this table. He looked at me and said, there is no way in the world that today a white person would call a Black person a kafir and expect to live. And it is utterly impossible. You will never hear a Black person calling another Black person a kafir. And he said, I don't understand. I still
Mm,
don't understand.
powerful.
And that has really, really stuck with me. That was one of the many experiences that I could share that even reinforced in my mind that I should never use that word.
I got you.
And when people come in my house, I ask them, I say, please don't use that word in here.
I got you.
If you want to refer to somebody in a derogatory manner or whatever, please use another word.
I got you.
And I have to, and this brother was young.
Yeah,
He was at least 15 years younger than myself.
yeah, I got you. Let me
So
ask you this, as we almost come to a close, this one just popped in mind. What is the difference between black people in America and black people who grew up in Africa?
to me,
Because
language.
I'm shaping it in this way. Black people in America, we lived through the civil rights, racism. We know all those stories, whatever. The black people in Africa did. I don't know, and this is the question. I don't know if they didn't live through similar circumstances. So how did that shape them? How did what we went through shape us? That defines the difference when you meet them over there.
Well, first of all, I think black people went through very similar circumstances. Similar, not exact.
Okay.
I'm going to defer to, there was a South African dance troupe that came to Chicago, and I was connected with them, and they wanted to go to the hood because they had them staying out in the suburbs with these shopping malls and everything. So I took them to a grammar school, and they did a short performance for the grammar school. And one of the students, it was an eighth grader, I remember, she said, when you look at me or when you talk to me, what is the difference that you see between you and I? And he looked at her very simply and said, language. And I want to answer your question in the same manner. I think the biggest thing is language. And what I see from my perspective, the difference between what Black people in Africa have gone through and what Black people here is going through comes down to this. If you own a house and somebody comes in your house and says, I'm taking over and I'm going to tell you everything that I'm going to tell you what you can and cannot do. And I'm going to determine how I treat you. As opposed to them taking you out of that house and taking you someplace else to another house and treating you the same way. So I think, in my opinion, and again, this is subjective, in my opinion, the circumstances are extremely similar. When you look at what happened in some of the countries, South Africa's one, Zimbabwe. If you look at what happened in some of these colonized countries, people were beaten, they were hung, they were killed. It was, very, very similar.
Okay. I guess last question. How does it feel now that they've gotten it and they're back on top? When the president and all the other people are black and they run it and they don't have a racial strife like we maybe have here in America. Can you feel the difference when you get there?
Yes, well, I didn't really know what it was like before that.
Yeah.
Because I didn't visit when you had this type of stranglehold of colonization. So I can't speak to exactly what it was like. But there's still a problem. There's still a problem because in a lot of countries, the economics and the resources are still not, from what I can see.
Yeah,
okay,
yeah,
and I'm not a reporter.
Sure.
Are not 100% controlled by, even though the government is is black, and I think all the cases in at least all the black African countries. But we can look at it when when Obama was president, was he 100% in control?
Okay. Is there a question that I have not asked you? Something you want to say? Like departing words type
Well,
thing?
no, I would just, I hope that the information that I passed on in my experiences can be helpful or beneficial to other people. If anything, I would say to people, always search for the truth. And the truth is not the easiest thing to get at, especially today, with all the different avenues of information that come. But I think if people really truly use their real intellect, then you will have a very, 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 very good idea of what the truth actually is. And the truth, getting at the truth can be very time consuming. It can be expensive. Um, you know, I was fortunate. I've been able to make all these trips to the continent, to Africa. Everybody's not able to do that. So people who are actually interested would rely on either people like myself or the news media to give them information. But I would say that, especially I would say when it comes to us, we need to really, really be searching out looking for the truth. Because if we don't, we're going to continue to find ourselves on this Ferris wheel where every so many years we find ourselves in the exact same position, even though the environment is different, the technology is different, but the circumstances in many ways are not different.
I got you. Have you written a book or anything like that? Is that in the works? Something maybe share some of these experiences. Do you do public speaking in this regard?
I don't consider myself to be a public speaker because I'm very analytical, and most people are not interested in that, you know, because any of the things that we talked about, I could probably go into a lot of detail. I did do a documentary. I put together a documentary on my time living in Africa and a couple of my other experiences in other countries. So that documentary was completed because I came back to the States in 2002. So that documentary was fully edited, at least that version of it, because I got hundreds and hundreds of hours of footage. I'd say probably around 2004, 2004, 2005. And there was a period of time where I would go into grammar schools and high schools, and I would show the documentary and I would share my experiences. The key here is that people have to be interested.
Yeah. Is
You
it on
know, it
Amazon? Did you
no,
actually
no, no. It's on a
produce it?
DVD. It's on a DVD here in my house.
Oh, I got
It was professionally edited though.
you. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, well, you might have some there. Well, hey, I thank you so very much for coming on Strong Inspirations. We got to the heart of it too, my brother. We
Okay.
really did, and you eloquently expressed it. And everybody, this is what I do here. Hit the subscribe button, hit the like button. There is no love button, but I know you had to come away with something from what he shared. And hit the notifications bell when the videos come up. You know, you get somewhere knowing, but just go down the list and watch them as you see fit. You can move the cursor wherever you want. You get past me. Get to the heart of it. Get to the people if you so see fit. Share it in them schools too, everybody. And go to my website, businessintheblack.net. You can see my books, the movie, the calendars, where I'm speaking, and so on and so forth. And to you, my brother, I say this, and I mean this with all sincerity. I want you to stay strong, stay safe, stay on your grind. I love who you become. Because somehow, somewhere in that transition between living in St. Louis and going to college and all the other life experiences, some said, I'm going to step out here. I'm beyond this territory, this spot on the world, and I'm going on the other side. And I'm going where my people are to hear their stories and to hear the truth and to help them be a little more educated by what I teach in that classroom and what I share. You an ambassador for us. That's what there it is. That's the word I'm gonna use.
Well, I
Been a
appreciate
bunch of times. You an ambassador for us. And I'm sure you do it smoothly and coolly and all the other leads too. Good lookingly and everything. Speaking very well and telling a good story about us here in America. I thank you so very much for that. With that, I'll say, and maybe you can do this. How do you say bye bye in some other language that you know?
um now you put me on the spot. I remember how to say hello in Chichewa, which is Muli Blanji,
Okay.
And then you say thank you. You say Indili Bueno Zikomo.
Okay.
Zikomo is thank you.
Okay. There you go.
So
Good enough.
okay,
Bye
Zikomo.
bye. We
Okay.
out. Thank you.
Zikomo Kwambili.
Oh, there it is. It came to me.
Yeah, Zikomo
Right on,
Kwambili.
man.
Okay.
Thank you.